Okay, so I did my research article on D&D tabletop games, and this is why D&D is not as lame as you heard. Get it to. So for the chat part, distribution, so they have handbooks, so like hardback books and that you can buy in like comic book stores or even online on like Amazon or any other place that you can buy books from. They have online books which are available on gaming services like D&D Beyond, Roll20, and stuff like that, or on like Kindle. They do have cookbooks that are available. I just bought one that is based off of a spell called Hero's Feast. It has a bunch of different food items that you can cook yourself, that they used inspiration from D&D gaming itself. They do have fictional books, so people who play D&D will sometimes actually write books based off of campaigns that they've played or actual campaigns that they are currently playing. They do have small like short stories that people do write that are available. You can either buy these in like bookstores. I know Barnes and Noble has quite a few that are done by more popular people who do online campaigns, which is um, very common for YouTubers to make videos about that. It's like a whole thing. It's really fun to watch. One that I watch personally is called Girls, Guts, and Glory, which is all female gamers. Um, they do have online campaigns which you can run as a DM yourself with friends and family who are also gaming. And there are in-person campaigns. So if you have all the in-hand books and character sheets, you can invite people over to your house and you can play in person. The socialization of D&D. So books and figurines are sold in comic book stores. So you kind of have to go in and try to find things that you like that are close to your character, which is pretty fun. Or you can have them customized on different websites. Um, People play in large or small groups online and in person, like I said earlier. Um, the smaller the groups are, the quicker it is during a battle part, um, or even just role playing where you're talking to non-player characters or NPCs. It makes it go quicker. You roll initiative to be able to fight in a certain order. So it's not just random, it's not just you randomly yelling out like, now I'm gonna do this. There's a certain order to it. Um, Hosting the games is a little bit different. Sometimes the DM hosts, sometimes other people will host. Particularly in my friend group, me and my husband host. We're not always the DMs for the game. Sometimes we have friends who would like to DM, but don't have the space particularly to host. For us, we provide a meal. So if we're hosting at dinner time, I'll make dinner, or if we're hosting during lunchtime, I'll make lunch, or both. If it's mostly an all sort of day thing, sometimes a host will ask you to bring snacks or drinks, or ask people to bring stuff for themselves. One thing that I know we particularly do while DMing is I will ask each person in the game to bring one thing. So one of our friends will bring drinks, the other friends will bring snacks, somebody will bring a dessert, and we'll make a meal. And it's pretty fun. This is just a funny meme about D&D. So representation, there are campaigns which can be played in person or online, as I said. That's a very important thing to make clear. You don't have to be in person to play, especially right now during a pandemic. Online gaming has become pretty big because it gives people, the safety of playing with their friends in their own home. We have a friend who is a paramedic and had been exposed multiple times to the coronavirus. So her and her husband played online with us, and it made it to where they could still play and interact with us all while we were gaming, which is pretty great. Um, they can also be ran using a dungeon, and or DMs can make one on their own. So a dungeon is kind of a little exercise. Like if you read, Percy Jackson, where everything is laid out, that would be like running a dungeon. Everything's set up. There's certain rooms, certain monsters that each person can fight, battle, and even goodies or loot to get when they win the dungeon. Or DMs can make up their own things. So I've seen one of the most popular things on D&D Beyond and even in-person gaming or mixed media of the sorts has been a Rick and Morty campaign. So it's kind of a little mix of a dungeon and also um, people making it up on their own because it's mostly homebrewed, because Rick and Morty and Summer, all of them don't exist as actual characters in a player handbook. So somebody made it up and played it. It was really fun, and they were able to sell the idea online. Or one that I did most recently last Christmas was I had my players play a fictional holiday character such as Rudolph, Santa, Jack Frost, and they battled the Krampus or the anti-Santa, which was really fun. Now onto the structure of the game. The DM or the book campaign sets up the government, cultural norms, and how the races and classes interact with each other. So the government stand-up, like setup, is very important because without having an actual world existing, it's really hard to get a feel for what your characters can and can't do while gaming. Cultural norms are kind of like orcs and elves interacting with each other without hating each other. Um, all the races and classes interacting with each other. So clerics are kind of holy people, and wizards are kind of a little bit more chaotic evil in some sorts. They're not really bad, but they do make pacts with demons and other sort of stuff. So wizards and clerics tend to not get along with orcs and elves don't get along. Orcs think elves are uppity. Elves think that orcs are kind of brutes and undignified. Um, Other things are like tabaxi, which are humanoid cat people. Um, they tend to be a little bit more roguish, and how all these races interact with each other is very important for how different towns and cities are structured. So if somebody built a world where the races intermingling and traveling together, or it's a predominantly human world, then if you have a party, like in my last campaign, which has an orc and a goblin and an elf and a halfling going into a human town, you tend to get a lot of funny looks. People tend to mistrust you more because all these races aren't really common. So that's very important when it comes to playing the game and can be really fun. Party alignments. So this would be if people are good or if they don't sway towards being good or bad. This affects the way that the campaign goes. So you can play a good campaign where everybody is fighting the big bad, is what most common gamers would call it. So there is chaotic good, chaotic bad, and chaotic neutral. So they're a little bit on the sporadic side, but chaotic good mostly is people who stick to being good. Neutral is where whoever is winning, they're gonna hang out with the people who are really winning. And then there is lawful good. So if you think about somebody who sticks more towards the rules of being good. So if there are written laws and you stand to uphold the law for the good, and there is lawful neutral, where they will go sway towards either the good or the bad in a way of, so here is, I thought this was good, but it turns out that that good is really bad. So now I'm going to go towards the bad, now good side. Reception. So there are tabletop games that are a lot like D&D. It's not just this. There is Warhammer, D&D, and quite a few other ones, Pathfinder, to name a third. And there's really a range of feelings. So each campaign can go differently. You tend to get attached to the characters that you build. After all, most people build their first character as something of a representation of themselves. It's easier to play. So, you know, one of your friends' character dies in battle, it could be a little bit sad. You're probably not going to cry, but you just missed out on getting to play with that person in the future. It is a creative outlet. So I have a friend who is a writer who quite enjoys playing D&D, as it has given her more of a way to write more and create more short stories. She played a halfling character and was able to write a short story out of all the cool things her character had done throughout our last campaign, which was pretty cool and a fun read. Everyone has autonomy in the game. So your character is your character. The DM does not make you only do certain things. So if you decide that you're going to wake up in the middle of the night and go and rob the entire town, you can. You could potentially die or be thrown in jail, but that is up to you solely. You're able to pick and choose where it is that you go. So instead of the DM saying, okay, today in this session, you guys are gonna go to the haunted moonlit hall, and that's exactly where you guys are gonna go. You guys will have your characters wake up and it'll be, what are you gonna go do? Are you gonna go to the haunted moonlit hall, or are you going to go to the bar to try to get, recon on this terrible cult who's taking over an entire town and turning everybody into vampires, which is very fun. Activity. The dungeon master, or DM is what most people call it, can run through a campaign for the various books, or they can create the whole world themselves. I said this before, it's a lot harder to create a whole world, but they do have books where there are different different plot lines and stories to follow. I got one for the first time I DM'd, as it was very difficult for me to make a whole world. So I got Princes of Darkness, which is a book about pretty much the end of the world, and my players had to actually beat all these different evil people to gather up their weapons to create a big weapon, and then fight off all these bad guys to save the world. They had a blast. I had a blast as well. Both can be really fun. My husband has created a world where you planar jump. So you're not just part of one world, you are part of many worlds in different realms, and it's very fun. So here's another funny one. So the ecology, the production of the environment on the book is actually really unknown to me. It was definitely written before my time. It was actually written as not a war game. So before D&D, the only games that you could play like this were kind of like war games, where you could play Battle of the Bulge and have a blast. And then the creators of D&D got bored with that and were like, we need to do something different. And they did. The production of the environment is a little bit different, as each person who runs a campaign can differ, as every DM does things differently. When characters and players have interest in the game or are involved more, who play more, and even take notes, it tends to make the DM put more into it. So the more backstory you have to a character, the more the DM is going to put your backstory into the campaign that you're currently playing. And that makes it so much more fun than just sitting around and playing Monopoly, in my opinion. The production. So it was created by Gary Gygax and Dave, I can't say his last name to be quite honest with you, in 1974 as an alternative to war games, as I said earlier. They were just bored of playing them, and they like to tell stories of battling dragons, and it slowly turned into an actual game. So it started to pick up speed in the 80s after Hasbro's Wizards of the Coast bought the game. Online forums like Roll20 and D&D Beyond started in the mid-20s or a little bit earlier to now. So D&D, the good and the bad. So personally, I found it to be very helpful. I had very bad social anxiety, like even before starting to record this, though you guys can't see me, it made me very nervous. So D&D helped me really find my place in being able to speak out loud and talk in public places, as it wasn't always just me and my husband playing with close friends. I actually used to play D&D at comic book stores, which really helped. Uh, it does create a friendly community of people. So D&D is really great at finding new friends to get along with, and there's sort of this commonality between people. So like I said, I used to play going to a comic book store, and we've made a lot of friends that way. Um, I've talked about it at work and got new players to come to the table as people are like, wow, that sounds really cool and really fun. Sorry about that. Um, it can be a coping mechanism for daily stressors. It kind of gives that outlet of being able to, go and not have to deal with, right now there's a global pandemic outside, and you can sit down at your computer and pretty much Zoom call your friends and play a game and get to talk and kind of forget about the fact that we're all stuck in our homes yet again. Um, the bad part about D&D is the way that it's perceived. There is a notion that it's only for losers and nerds, which is why I really wrote my paper on this. I really have a problem with people seeing it as something taboo, or you can't talk about it if you do play it because people are going to look at you differently. Like it's not really great. You don't tell somebody who plays, in a football fantasy league that they're weird for liking football so much to where they pick their own football team to play. Um, there was an idea that it was evil or could lead to people participating in the satanic occult. I'll get on that a little bit more. There's a lack of understanding of the people who play. So, like I said, there was um, a family member of mine who constantly referred to me playing D&D as nerds in the basement and not Dungeons and Dragons. Um, it really pushed me to not talk about it with those family members, as it always made me feel a little bit more quiet and unease, as I couldn't talk about playing D&D like you would talk about playing Monopoly or Scrabble. Um, where all of these came from was in the 70s and 80s. So we'll go to the next one. So here is the D&D cookbook that I have, the Heroes Feast. Culinary acceptance is kind of important when it comes to people slowly adjusting to sorry, my mic was cutting out. Um, as I put over here, the cookbook had just released earlier this year. It's based off of a cleric and druid spell. As you can see, there are a range of different races and stuff sitting around this feast. It has plenty of different recipes. I even made the orange duck that's in there for our Thanksgiving dinner. There are restaurants and bars that have opened across the world. It's not just in the United States where people are really embracing, as they call it, the nerd culture. There is a restaurant that gives you a 20-sided die and has you roll to build your own burger. You can actually pick out what you want, but if you're undecided, they will give you a dice. Um, this is from one of their their new books that just came out. That is an owl bear. Entertainment acceptance was also very important. So Disney came out with their movie Onward earlier this year, which was about two elf boys whose dad passed away. He leaves them as staff with a gem to resurrect him for a full day. They have to go and quest to find it so they could bring back their dad. It was a really cute movie. My daughter definitely enjoys it, and so did I. Netflix released an original movie called Bright, starring Will Smith, where a human and an orc are police officers together. They have to work together in times where all these other races are frowned upon. Like I said earlier, when it comes to your world and the way that you build it, how races interact with each other is very important, and they stuck with that pretty well. They made it to where humans definitely have more sway in the world than all the other ones. Gnomes, fairies, elves, and orcs are tend to look down upon. Um, Popular TV shows such as Rick and Morty and Game of Thrones. Um, the people who starred in Game of Thrones actually went to cons or conventions. Rick and Morty actually made a D&D reference in their new season, um, which was pretty funny. There are video games such as like Divinity and Elder Scrolls and even Skyrim. So all of these make it a little bit easier for people who normally wouldn't have accepted the game itself, and actually really, really helped people grasp the concept and it becoming more of a home name. So the fun parts of D&D, the different ways to play it. So being a dungeon master or a DM, you get to build your own world. You can follow it from a book, but the funnest part is building your own world. Like I said, the government part of it, the social structure, cultural structure, and political structure. All of that can be different throughout whatever campaign you're playing. Being a player character or a PC, you are in charge of making your own character. So backstories, race, class, alignment can be very fun. Personally, you can play whatever gender you want, whatever race you want. Normally, I would have always picked being an elf cleric. Healing people tends to be my favorite person to play. However, this new campaign coming up, wanted to switch it up a little bit, and I picked being a male orc who is half elf, whose parents are happily married and own a bookstore. They went questing when they were younger, so they expected him to go questing. And in this world, questing is a lot like college. So your parents went to college after high school, so they kind of expected you to go to college after high school. And it's a very fun character. So things needed for gaming. Online gaming, you either need a tablet or a computer, dice or dice roller, which you can get an app that rolls dice for you. Some of the different online gaming forums actually come with a dice roller and built in their system. Notes, you can either run that on your computer or you can just have a plain notebook and a pencil, mics, or a phone for group calling. All of this is important, along with obviously having a sort of online gaming forum that you belong to. So in-person gaming, which is right under the Disney princesses playing D&D, you're going to need a character sheet, dice, pencils, and notepads, a figurine, which is optional. It helps to know your placement on the map, maps, that is, if you're going to host or DM, usually you will have a map for the game that you're playing. If not, that's fine. A player's handbook, folder, and magic cards, so our spell cards. There are several different classes that do have certain spells. It's easier to remember instead of having to flip through the player's handbook for each spell. You can buy the cards online or at any comic book store who sells gaming stuff. So hosting or playing, it depends on the host. If you're going to bring snacks or drinks for yourself, a meal, usually you should have extra dice just in case, you know, your players have forgotten them. Books and extra character sheets. Sometimes the party does die and you need to make new characters, or maybe just one or two. That's my works cited. We are going to jump back to the good and the bad. So where all of the bad came from in the 1970s and 80s, which gave really the full pushback on D&D, was in 1974, there were two names that came up, James Egbert III and Ivring Bulling II, that made them household names for all the wrong reasons. So for the first guy, he had been he was 17 and he had gotten accepted into Michigan State. He was so much younger than everybody, but for some reason he went missing. His family couldn't find him, whatever, so they hired a private investigator. His last name is Deere, well, William Deere. He was known for his unconventional methods and showmanship. And when he was trying to go through some of Egbert's room, he found D&D books. He had been playing a different dungeon for the Underdark, which is pretty much like the underground world of D&D. Well, in Michigan State, they had tunnels, so Deere decided to let the press know that he believed that Egbert was literally hiding out in the tunnels underneath the college, playing, living out his D&D world. It turned out that he actually wasn't there. He became very depressed as he was so much younger than the rest of his college mates, and began using drugs and self-isolating himself. He was really not understanding his sexuality and decided to try to kill himself. Well, after it was failed, he did the right thing and checked himself into rehab and got better. Well, the press and Deer didn't really like that ending of the story, so they actually really kept it as he disappeared into those tunnels. They actually made a movie called Mazes and Monsters, and said that pretty much D&D blurred the lines of reality, and that D&D is bad for psychological health, which is completely untrue. As I stated, he never really went underneath in those tunnels. And then this other gentleman in 1982 had killed himself. His mother found D&D books in his room, among other things, and that he was playing the game without her knowledge. So she assumed that the reason why he killed himself was because he was involved in the occult or the satanic occult. There was no other evidence. She just kind of came to the conclusion that that's why he killed himself. He was not involved in any satanic things. She turned to what they call BAD, or Brotherhood Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons. They actually wrote a book about Dungeons and Dragons called The Devil's Web, and it really created a sour taste in everybody's mouths about D&D. It definitely created that stigma. So along with all of that, it kind of came into this terrible view on D&D that kind of stuck around for a long time. So hopefully I've changed your mind about D&D, and thank you for listening.